Okay, and she will have to cut it for the appropriate time, I guess. Cool. There are currently 73 people in the waiting room, but it's going up quite quickly, so we'll see. And I forgot to say as well, I will, while you're talking, I'll turn my camera and mute myself, obviously, but I'm still here, so feel free just to speak to me via the webinar or send me a message or something.
Okay, brilliant.
I'll be watching and
Okay.
Cool. All right, it's now 4 o'clock, so I'm going to invite everyone and
Yeah,
I'll say hello.
I see the numbers creeping up. This is exciting.
Yeah, hello everyone, welcome. We're going to just give it a couple of minutes to give people a chance to join. We're at 100 people already, which is fantastic. 150 now, so there's quite a few of you registered, so we're going to wait until sort of a couple of minutes, maybe 5 past, and then get started.
Amazing. Whilst we're all rating, please feel free to say hi in the chat. If you want to give your name and maybe where you're joining us from, as well as your top 3 strengths. We will be talking a lot about strengths today. If you haven't had the opportunity to complete your strengths profile, you can go to the 10K Intern Foundation Preparation Plus to do so, as well as get access to many other elements. I will pop the link in the chat for anyone who might need it. I'm sure it will be carried away by everyone saying hello as well. So if you need it, you'll just need to scroll up a little bit. Amazing. I'm seeing all the way from Aberdeen down to London. Really great to see everyone in between as well. I love that we've already accessed the Q&A section as well. If you're new to Zoom, you can go onto the More tab, the 3 dots, and you'll be able to see the Q&A there, question and answer. I've got Jack from 10,000 Interns Foundation with me, for those of you who weren't here at the very beginning of the call, who will be able to answer some of those questions as well around how you get access to recording.
Okay, so we're now at just over 225 people, and it's 3 minutes past, so I think we'll get started.
Sure.
A couple of notes from me. So my name's Jack. I work for the 10,000 Interns Foundation. Welcome to everyone who's joining. This is going to be a really great session, and we're really pleased to see so many people. A couple of housekeeping notes. So if you haven't already, you can use the webinar chat to say hi, introduce yourself. More information on that coming in the presentation. And then also, as Emma Louise just said, there is a Q&A. So if you click the More button, or it should appear if you're on your computer in the bar at the bottom of the screen. You can submit questions to be answered, and you can also upvote questions. So if you really want to see the answer to those questions, upvote them. As we go, I might be responding to some. Do try and keep your questions in the Q&A, as there are so many messages in the chat, I will struggle to keep up with them. And feel free to react. And yeah, we will be following up after the session with anything that comes up. But I will now hand over to Emma Louise. Thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jack. Hi, everybody. My name's Emma Louise. I'm really excited to be here today. This is a follow-up from the previous session around discovering your strengths. And now it's all about being your best self. And for us, that means that we're going to dig into different approaches around different assessment structures and types, and how you show up in the best way possible for you. So it's absolutely incredible to have you all here with me today. Very excited to have the next kind of 45, 55 minutes or so to chat this through. So thanks again. So just as Jack said, really, really happy for you to engage with us how you can. Obviously, there is a lot of us today. So with Jack's support, we'll be going through some of those Q&As later on in the session. And also feel free to chat with each other. There are exactly 264 of us here today. So it's not just me here to tell you all of the insides and outs. There will be so much that we can learn from everybody, and that's what's so important. So please make sure that you're also asking questions and chatting with each other, because that's where we will learn even more than we did before. So if you haven't already completed a strengths profile through the 10K Intern Foundation Prep Plus site, please do so. You don't necessarily have to do so right now, but I want your focus. But for those of you who do have it, please go and get it to hand. It's great. And for those of you who haven't done one yet, it's free and a really great opportunity to identify your behavioral strengths, which we will touch on why it's so important to do so later on in the session. So just because there have been loads of messages, really loving how everyone is saying where they're from. Thank you for saying hello. I'm just going to pop that link in yet again. So please do have a look at that if you haven't yet had an opportunity to do so. Okay, so if you've used Zoom webinar before, you will be familiar with all the functionality, but Jack's just walked you through all of those processes. So I'll get right on to mentioning who I am. And as I said, my name is Emma Louise. I'm an occupational psychologist and a managing consultant at Capfinity. So Capfinity are all about strengthening the world through skills-based assessment and development. So we support organizations and talent mobility efforts, as well as individuals like yourselves, to become a better version of you and show up and really thrive in the workplace and in the world. So really excited to be here today. I have quite a strong background in assessment, so more than happy to answer your questions on that. I know it's a really nerve-wracking time, but also a very exciting one. My top strengths are narrator, authenticity, and resolver, which feel very relevant to me and my role in that I advise clients, so I need to be able to really paint a picture for them. I'm authentic in how I show up, which makes me feel my best and lets me show up in my best way. And resolver, I like to solve client problems. So I find that I found a really good job that's fit my top strengths. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how you explore your top strengths as you go into these assessment processes. So this is a follow-up webinar from the strength sessions where we focus on next steps, including assessment and interview preparation. So just a brief overview of what to expect. There are kind of three core areas: being prepared, so kind of practical tips on interviews, preparing ways to bring your best self, and of course, any questions that might come from interviews or any questions you might have about any of the other processes. Being present, thinking about positive self-talk, power poses, and really pausing and considering so that you're not rushing through some of these more difficult or challenging times. And being your best self. So really thinking about how you can be authentic, knowing yourself, and bringing that to life in a way that really does you justice, and considering things like imposter complex and how we try to manage to get over those. All right, so we've got quite a packed agenda, so we will dive straight in. So this is Mercer Seeley's quote that really speaks about how potential and behavioral elements are becoming more and more important than technical because the world of work is constantly evolving. So it doesn't mean that technical skills aren't important, the things you might have gone to school for, or the elements that you are learning on your own, like coding, for example. But it's that the technical skills and the technical requirements are constantly changing. And so, what we're suggesting is that skills can be learned, but what we're looking for are strengths, potential, and really demonstrating those positive behaviors. Because that's what's really critical to understand at the assessment point of view is, will you really fit into this role? Do you have the skills that are required to get yourself running? So that's what we're going to be looking to do. So it's not really about the technical skills as much these days. We're not necessarily looking for that fully formed employee that's ready to go, but more those that can learn and can adapt as this world constantly adapts. I know that all of us have had some difficulties and challenges over the last few years, and it's those kind of things where we can reflect on that will make us better for the workplace tomorrow. So, like I said to you before, Capfinity are in the ring of assessments and development. And we have been here almost 2 decades, almost 20 years in operation. And with that, we've partnered with loads of early career clients delivering assessments for various opportunities. And in this time, we've done a lot of research and collected a lot of data to determine some of the key employability skills. So you'll see some of these listed on the screen. And if I were you, I would be jotting these down because these are really great skills to be practicing ready for your assessments and interviews and assessment centers. So we took all of these different data points and we took them together to understand that these are kind of the top skills that employers are looking for. So it's more than likely that you'll be assessed on some of these skills in your upcoming assessments. And it's really worth thinking about where you've demonstrated these skills in the past and start thinking about how you interact with these skills and if they are something that you might need to use in the workplace for the job that you've applied for. So this section is all about being prepared, which will enable you to demonstrate your best self during an assessment, an interview, or an assessment center. So there are many components to applications that you might want to prepare for, and we're going to look at what some of these might be. So for example, the online applications. This is where you might have to answer a few questions about yourself. You might have to complete some demographic information around your education and your experiences. These are questions that you really want to consider as this will be your first touch point with the organization. Now, it might be of interest to you to use things like AI or ChatGPT to start thinking about how you might want to answer any of those questions. However, I would suggest that you use this as a coach. It's definitely a beneficial tool, but don't just be simply copying and pasting information, as it won't sound like your authentic self. And it's really important that that reflection element comes from within. Online assessments are usually that next process. When there's a lot of candidates, what we tend to find is that organizations use online assessments to support what they're sifting. It's a great way for them to understand your preferences and your tendencies and your skills, and if they're aligned to the absolutely critical skills required in those roles. So it might be that there are situational judgment tests or cognitive assessments, for example. There might be some preference tools or even maybe some activities like a case study. These assessments get to obviously let the organizations get to know you. But one thing I will say is that it's also a really great opportunity for you to understand the organization. They might have some realistic job preview information in there where they get to show you what kind of information you might be working with or how they're expecting you to work in the workplace so that you can understand if it's a really good fit for you. The next one is interviews, and there are loads of different interview types. One you might have heard of is a competency-based interview, and also a strengths-based interview. And obviously, strengths-based or skills-based are what Capfinity really focus on. It's a slightly different style, which we'll discuss in a little bit more detail in just a moment. And then that last step is usually an assessment center. So these often form lots of different elements, and it's a really great way for you to interact with the organization, interact with other candidates, and also for the organization to interact with you. So similar to those online assessments, this is where you get a chance to really see what is required in the role. There might be some group exercises, presentations, or case studies where you'll be assessed because those are critical skills that are desired for the role. It's a really brilliant opportunity to explore the requirements and whether it feels like a really good fit for you. I think what I mean to say is remember that throughout all of these steps, it's not just for the organization to decide if you're a good fit for them, but it also goes the other way around. And that's a really important reflection for you to have so that you can be asking questions to the interviewers as well when you get the opportunity. So if we dive in a little bit more with online assessments, like I was saying, there are various types, and that means that there are going to be various platforms and there are going to be various styles. So the best way to prepare for these is to get familiar with the platforms and the types of questions you might be asked to complete. So more often than not, organizations will offer some kind of practice test material to help with this. So there are a number of examples on the Preparation Plus site that you have specific to you. And we also have one, if you Google Capfinity Prep Hub, you'll be able to see some other assessment there too. So some really nice ways of getting to know what the different kind of assessment types might be and getting to interact with those platforms. So for example, there might be some preference sliders where you need to pick one way or the other. There might be some Likert scale options. Or some bucket sorts where you have to look at the question and then pick in what bucket it goes to, kind of like forced choice. And also some kind of ranking with situational judgment tests. You might have to rank order responses, or you might have to pick the best or the least appropriate option, for example. So there are lots to choose from, and you might be seeing lots of different item types. It's important to remember as well that if you have reasonable adjustment requests, so for example, in school, you might have had extra time for things like dyslexia, or maybe you have autism or something to do with mobility where you will struggle to complete some of these assessments. It's really important that you engage with the organization early about this. And usually when you're actually applying to the organization, there will be some opportunity for you to highlight this need. But if not, before you actually start any of these assessments, it's really important that one, you actually look at any of the practice tests that are available to you to determine whether or not you feel comfortable doing those tests, and also engaging with the organization to discuss your options. So it might be that they can give you some extra time, or it might be that there's an alternative assessment that's going to be more appropriate for you. So if we want to think about how we should prepare, there are many ways that an organization will know if you truly are prepared for online assessments or interviews or even assessment centers. So things like doing your research on the company, these are going to be really important because you are going to be stacked up against a lot of people. And similar to what I was saying, every step in the way, the organization gets to assess you, but also you get to make sure that you are a right fit for what the organization is offering. So with that in mind, you need to really do your research on the company, explore their website, explore their social media pages, and get a feel for what it's like to work there and what their goals and their aims are and how you would be contributing to that. Definitely know what's on your CV as well as the job description. I heard a saying once, and this was a long time ago, but it takes a full-time job to get a job. And it does feel really tiring, but it's really important that you're considering the job description and the verbiage that they're using in that job description and trying to match that with your CV so that you can really demonstrate in the best way possible how your skills and your experience matches what they require. We will talk a little bit more about how to prepare asking questions to the employer because it's important that you come across as curious. And this is a really great time for you to ask the questions that you might have that are burning on inside. Anticipating questions and crafting potential responses. I've already mentioned it once, but ChatGPT can be a really great opportunity to try and practice some of those kind of questions so you can use it as a bit of a coach, or even going and speaking to somebody else about those things can be really helpful. So for example, you might be able to video yourself and listen back to what you say, or even trying to do that with another person and getting them to explain or give a bit of feedback on how that went. Also, making links to your JD. So the job description is what I mean by JD, and those experiences and strengths. And then testing your technology. Practice using your video. It's really, really important. I don't know if any of you have kind of heard this before, where someone's a pea head on the screen or things like that. So if I'm sitting down here, it's not really helpful because you can't see my mouth, you can't see how I'm moving, and I'm just a little blob at the end of the screen. You're going to want to make sure that if you're in a virtual setting, you're truly sitting in the right position. They can see your shoulders where possible, and you feel like you can engage with the individual. Obviously, some of this is going to be out of our control, but the more that you can really feel confident in going into these situations are going to be the better. I would also love to hear from you on any of your tips. We will be sharing a takeaway document with you at the end of the session, so that will help in terms of any reminders or preparation tips for professional virtual presence. But I'd love to hear from all of you if you have any suggestions on how to prepare for these types of interviews or online assessments. Please do share them in the chat. I'm sure everyone will be really eager to find out. Also really love that people are sending their LinkedIn as well. It's really great to connect with one another. And you can even use each other as a tool, right? I think it's really important that you can sit down and you can practice with one another and give each other feedback where you can. Okay, so if you do want to find out more about assessments, I have added the link to the slide as well. It is in the chat, but it will be long gone by now. So definitely have a click of that link if you're still looking for online assessment prep, as well as a strengths profile. Okay, so I think the burning question is always around interviews, and there are so many different types of interviews available. It might be that it's one-on-one, it might be two-on-one where there's two assessors and one of you as a candidate. It might be, in fact, that you've got a panel of candidates or even a panel of interviewers. So it could be a bit of a group style interview where they ask you a question and there will be a lot of you in a room, or you might have more of the intimate one-on-one style. So it could be virtual or in person, and there's a lot to consider. So preparation is going to be what helps you be your best self. So we found that these strengths or skills are areas that employers tend to ask you questions about. So things like personal responsibility, communication, learning agility, resilience, and collaboration. So if we have a think about that, these are just some ideas of where you might want to highlight some of your experiences in using these skills. So for example, personal responsibility, you might have a responsibility of caring for your family, and actually you've taken control of organizing lunches or organizing a schedule so that your younger sibling is always cared for. It might be around communication. So for example, you might play sports, and we all know how important it is in team sports that you're communicating with one another on the field as well as off the field to make sure that you're all performing your best. So it's really a really great opportunity to kind of highlight where you do that. It might be also around collaborations. You might have had a project, a group project in college, and you might have led that, or you might have had to participate in something like that, or learning agility and resilience. So something that was really difficult. Maybe it was learning to drive. Maybe it was starting at a new location, and that was really tricky to navigate. Or maybe it was learning something online, or sewing, things like that, where you really had to stick with it after facing a challenge. This is an example of a question. Can you give an example of a situation of where you worked as a team? This is a competency-based interview question. I talked about some of the different types of interview styles you might see. A competency-based question typically asks for previous experience. So it's an opportunity for you to highlight a previous experience. That means that you shared that skill, that you built that skill using that experience. And I don't know if many of you have heard the STAR method before. So the STAR method is something that we talk about. It's called situation, task, action, and result. And it's a great way of getting across your points so that you kind of tick all of those boxes when you're asked things, especially in a competency-based interview. So in terms of an experience example, can you give an example of a situation where you worked as a team? A situation might be that you had a group project in a module at college. You were put into groups of 4 and you were provided a topic. We were asked to prepare a presentation on a topic that we would have to present to the group in 2 weeks' time. Then if I talk about the task, I need to include what actually happened. So in that task, there were 2 members of the group who both wanted to present on the same topic area, but we needed to take one section each, which meant that we were having difficulties assigning roles for the 2 weeks, and there were going to be difficulties in reaching that deadline. We then need to talk about action, which includes your solution and how you really overcame that conflict. So for the action, it might be that I took the lead in working out an opportunity of brainstorming the different areas that we wanted to be responsible for. If there was any overlap between individuals, we decided to draw out of a hat so that it was fair. Then in the result, we talk about the outcome and the learning. So this is where we really need to link to demonstrating the skill. So here, if you look at the question, can you give an example of a situation where you worked as a team? That working as a team element is the most important piece. So in that, I'll say, well, we worked as a team to brainstorm all the different options that we could be held responsible for the presentation, and we all agreed to draw out of a hat to keep that fair. It meant that each one of us was given a section that we felt comfortable in presenting and we were happy with. And it meant that we were able to reach our deadline and present well, and we ended up with a great grade. So that's where it's okay to talk about situations where you made mistakes. You really just want to explain what you learned. So it might be in that situation, well, I just tried to jump in and say originally, if both of you are adamant that you want that section to present, then I suggest that neither of you have that because that will be fairest. And I learned that actually that created more conflict. So instead, we took a moment to step back and brainstorm on how we could do this in the most fair way. And this meant that all of us felt like we were inputting to the conversation equally. So it's okay to talk about your mistakes, and it's really great to talk about your accomplishments, but also how you're then going to learn and what that means for you next time. So it might mean that in your next group situation, actually, it's not about immediately taking the lead, but it's about making sure that we've set out boundaries and rules around how we want to operate as a group so that everyone feels that they're valued and contributing equally. One tricky piece with this is to definitely look for synonyms. So for example, collaboration, it might be that in the job description, they're talking about working as a team or needing to have teamwork skills. And teamwork and collaboration will likely mean the same thing. So definitely be looking out for synonyms in the job descriptions as well when you're working out what to prepare for. Now, I also just want to take a moment to talk about strengths-based interviews. So unlike competency-based questions, the strengths-based methodology is more about a future-focused approach. So in these interviews, it'll be less likely talking about your previous experience, but more about discussing what comes naturally to you. So in order to be authentic, you don't need to prepare those scripted STAR answers as much. It's just important that you really answer authentically so that your natural strengths really come to shine. It's about getting to know you a little bit more and also about what motivates you and your potential. So we're not just looking at what you have done, but actually what potential do you have? So in the previous slide, I'll just dip back to that quickly. Can you give an example of a situation of where you worked as a team? Well, in the next one, you might see, are you someone who prefers working with others or working independently? Why? So in that situation, I might explain, actually, I really love working with others. It's something that I tend to prefer to do rather than working independently. This is an example of when I did that, blah, 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 blah. So you can see that it's a little bit more natural in explaining that. So the thing with strengths-based interviews is really don't overthink it. Don't be trying to guess because there really is no right or wrong answer. It's just about reflecting who you are. For example, in this one, it might be that actually you do prefer to work independently, but you recognize the importance of collaboration. So you prefer to work independently on something and brainstorm by yourself and then bring ideas to a collaborative table. So no wrong answers for a strengths-based interview. It's just giving examples, both professionally and personally, about how you have potential or what motivates you in that area. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the difficult part. Inevitably, there are interviewers who are going to be asking you if you have any questions. So have some prepared. Write them down and remember to read the room. So, for example, don't repeat something that's already been discussed. It might be that the interviewers already shared something about their culture, for example. So, you don't want to then turn around and say, what's the company culture like? Because they'll just be repeating themselves. These are some really great questions, and I would also love to hear some more questions in the chat. So please share what other opportunities you might use to ask these questions. Another thing that you might heard of is brave questions. So that's where questions really stand out as a candidate. So things like, do you have any feedback for me? Or are there any concerns about my current experience or history related to this role that you would like to address? This gives that really punch in terms of how much you really want that job and is saying that you really care to grow and that you really want to improve and you're open to feedback. So it's a really great attribute to have that employers really want to see in candidates. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else share any questions in the chat just yet, but please feel free to do so. There are some really great ones on screen around a bit more around how the teams work together, or perhaps what others have said about the best part of the role. Once you've got past that interview stage, we're then looking at assessment centers. So assessment centers offer you an opportunity to really understand the kind of challenges you might come across in the job and offers the organization a chance to see how you work through those challenges. So there will be various activities to complete in an assessment center, but just keep in mind that no one is ever trying to trick you. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And a few pointers to keep in mind here is make sure that you really carefully read and understand any of the information that you've been given. So if you've been given information, take the time to read it in the time that you have. Don't rush through it, but also remember that no one's trying to catch you out. So please do take the time to really understand what's been allocated to you and process those materials. And the second tip is really put simply, be yourself. Try not to second guess what you think the right answer or the approach might be, but rather approach tasks in your own unique way. And this is going to be the best way to show your potential and your ability. So if you require support to complete any of these activities, so activities might look like little micro exercises, there might be some reflection time, you might have a group exercise where you need to come up with a solution to a problem, or there might be some presentations or a case study where you either write a report or you present verbally. If you do require support to complete any of these activities, this is usually referred to as reasonable adjustments. So just like the online assessment stage, again, this is where you need to flag as early as possible to the organization that you do have reasonable adjustments that need to be addressed. You can go through with the organization the different activities at that assessment center and perhaps what adjustments are available to you and what might be required. So again, it might be that they can give you extra time. It might be that you need a quiet space to interact with the materials alone. It might be that you need simplified content or larger print, or it might mean that you need an alternative assessment to the one that they're offering. So that is a lot around all of the different assessment types and a lot of information to process. So keep all of this in mind. We do, again, have a little printout that's going to be coming your way as a bit of a reminder. And like I've said before, the Preparation Plus site is a really great opportunity to kind of get familiar with some of the item types that you might come across in some of these interviews or online assessments. But now let's think about how we be present. So this section is about being present during things like your interview and a few tips on the day. So let's start with something fun. You might be familiar with power posing, or you may have experienced the benefits of power posing before. Definitely give it a try. So I don't know what you're looking like right now, but whether you're sitting or standing, do some form of Superman pose. So you can stand with your legs slightly apart and your hands on your hips, feeling really confident, chest out, shoulders down, feeling really good and proud with your chin up. See how good you feel just holding that for a minute. Or it might be some other kind of power pose you can see on the screen there. You might be screaming and shouting. You might be really happy with yourself, though I have to admit this would get a little bit tiring holding that for more than a minute. But get that energy, feel that energy. So there has been research around the benefits of expanding yourself and your body and really opening up, which enables you to project your voice. It makes you feel more confident and it makes you appear more confident as well. So it's important to remember that even the greatest speakers who you might think are very confident, they do these before important events like interviews or presentations. So posture is going to be important, and it's really great to take a moment. So if it's in person, go to the bathroom, take a moment for yourself and feel that confidence. If it's virtual, before you flick on your screen, take a few minutes, grab your glass of water and sit and have your power pose for a little bit and feel that energy. That posture is going to be really important in the way that you speak and your voice projection. So again, if you're sitting down, try now adjusting your posture to sit up straight. Check if you might need a pillow or a blanket either under you or behind your back so that you can sit comfortably and you can sit confidently. So this is something that you will want to check before your interview if it is virtual, for example. In the takeaway, we will include a video from Amy Cuddy, who did this research on the benefits of power posing. So if you don't want to take it from me, watch that video and you'll just see how your confidence will soar. Another way to boost your confidence and your presence is around practicing positive self-talk. So you may be familiar with imposter complex, which is about feeling like we can't do something or that we're feeling inadequate. And something that helps kind of combat that is using mantras or I am statements that you can use and repeat. So things like, I will be the best I can be on the day. I can do this. I'm confident in who I am. Constantly talking to yourself in that positive self-talk mode will really help in boosting your confidence and prepare you to speak so positively about you for the day. Talking in an interview in an assessment center can feel kind of awkward because it's not something that we're used to doing. We're not used to kind of boasting about ourselves, but there is a reality here where that confidence will take you a long way. So what I'd love for you to do right now, if you have some, write your I ams in the chat or your mantras. And if you don't have any, make one up because it's so great to see. And I think the positive self-affirmations really, really help. I'm really loving it. Miriam, yes, positive self-affirmations. It's so, so important. You know, you wouldn't talk to your best friend in a negative light. You're always trying to big them up. And it's important that we give ourselves the same kind of love, especially before these interviews. I am good at what I do. I love it. So keep that up. And the last one I want to give you, and I really, really suggest that you try all three of these, is a mindful minute. So try doing a mindful minute just before your interview, taking the time to really center yourself and calm those nerves. So a mindful minute is an excellent habit to have and do before anything that's really important to you. It can only take a minute. I know some mindfulness techniques like meditation can take longer, and if you can practice those, brilliant. But for only a mindful minute, there's really no excuse not to try it. So in the takeaway, we will include links to guided mindful minutes. But if you prefer to do it yourself, it's really easy to do, or if you can't access YouTube, all you need to do is breathe in for 4 seconds and then breathe out for 5 seconds, or do a quick body scan. So, wherever you are, whether you're sitting or laying down or standing, scan from your feet to your head. So, feel conscious about your whole body and really bring yourself into that current moment. So, how do your feet feel against the ground? How do your hands feel in your lap, for example? Really connecting with yourself to give yourself that moment and bring in that confidence. So if you think about it, there are kind of other things that may be out of your control, but if you can really center yourself, then all you're worrying about for the day is managing your own nerves. And that's what you need to keep in mind for beginning the interview. So, if there are other things that might be out of your control, also feel free to say that. So, it's great to have a mindful minute and brilliant to have that positive self talk. Have those power poses whilst you're screaming, I can do it, I deserve to be here. But also, there might be some things that are out of your control. So, for example, there might be outside some construction. Okay, so there might be some roadworks that is making it very noisy for you. Hopefully, the call won't pick that up, but you never know. So you might just want to open the call and say, "It's so great to be here. I just wanted to mention before we start that there are unfortunately some unplanned roadworks happening just outside my living room. So there might be some background noise, and sometimes I might struggle to hear you. So may have to ask you to repeat yourself if that's okay." And I'm sure they'll really appreciate that kind of heads up. It also means that you're then more in control and you feel really good about that, especially in a virtual setting when we don't know what's going on around us. One thing that is really good to try and be in control of are the things like any possible distractions. So, is there a possibility that you have a pet who's going to be in the way? And can that pet be held by somebody else at that time? Maybe a doorbell or any kind of poor Wi-Fi connection. Anything you can do to have a plan B and a backup plan is going to be really, really important. The last one I want to chat with you about in this section is around what you can do during the interview. So, if there's one tip I can give you when participating in interviews, it would be taking a pause, doing exactly what I just did. I counted to 5 in my head before answering. And that's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it is worth taking your time. I know it sounds silly, but take your time and pause before answering questions to give yourselves a little bit of space. You don't know what they're going to be asking you, and you don't have to have answers right off the bat. Have a glass of water or something near you, take a sip, breathe, think about what it is that you want to say. You could repeat the question out loud before answering to give you some time, or ask the interviewer to repeat and rephrase a question if you need to, just to give yourself a little bit of breathing room. It's okay. And it also offers you an opportunity to take a little bit of control as well, which is going to be really important. Okay, so we're now entering into our final section, which is all around being your best self. So, this section is about being your best self, what it means, and how to bring your best self to an interview. I would really love for participants to answer in the chat. So, get that chat box open and tell me what you could talk about for 3 minutes without any preparation. So, if I turned around to you today and I said, "What could you talk to me about?" and you had to talk for 3 minutes straight, what would it be about? For example, I really love rugby, so I could probably talk about rugby. I could probably talk about my teammates and how we work together and how we create plays. It might be that I could talk about a recent project that I did, and how we operated as a team together, how we decided to split up the activities, what the problem was, and how we got there. I could probably talk about that a lot. So I'm seeing kind of something similar. So passions, Formula One, a lot of football, going to the gym, basketball, fashion. I love it. Economical and political climate of the world. Well, but I'm sure you could talk about that for more than 3 minutes at this stage. One Piece, mental health, Could talk about your resilience. Yeah, tennis, love it. Music, anime, lots and lots and lots going on. So, writing and books, makeup, I love it. So, there's so much that you could chat about. And it's going to be really important that you kind of think about what that means for you. So, I'm assuming that this is what being your best self really means because it's something that you're passionate about. It's something that you enjoy and it gives you energy. And that's why you feel like you could talk about it so quickly. So, keeping that in mind, there's a statement that I'd love for you to read. Being your best self means having the courage to be authentically you. So, I talked about this before using Strengths Profile as an opportunity to understand you a little bit more. It's a really great way to take some time to reflect on who you are and becoming self aware. Because how can you be authentic if you don't really know who you are? So, this is what it means to be authentic. Reflect on what some of these statements might mean for you. So, what matters to you? What energizes you? Where are you strong? What are some of your strengths? Where are your areas for development? How do you use your best self in tasks? So, think about some of the tasks that you might need to complete in the job that you're going for. How would you use some of your strengths in those areas? How do you change your self-talk about certain tasks? So there's certain tasks that maybe you struggle with a little bit, and so you really need to boost your confidence in that area. And how do you find the balance between when you believe you need to be and who you are? And what are you most proud of? So thinking about that and trying to outline who your true self is. So what does being authentic really mean on a personal level? Authenticity is a strength of mine now, but it wasn't all the time. I went through a phase at work where introducing myself in meetings was quite nerve wracking because I was quite worried about what others thought about me. Was I impressive enough? Was I as impressive as others in the room? Did I have enough experience that they thought I was credible? Have I won awards? Um, all of those kind of things were really weighing me down. But this changed quite quickly because it was very tiring and it was very exhausting being stressed out about this and trying to be someone else, trying to play a different character. So instead, being myself right away was really helpful. It helped me to build trust and build relationships. It also meant that I could show up better for myself. It was easier to be that way. So why wouldn't I be? And it just gave me the opportunity to really come from a place where I knew myself and I knew what I was offering to the table. And I think that's what I mean by being authentic to you is take time to really reflect on who you are. And we talked in the other session around discovering your strengths, how you might do that. So strengths profile is one way of doing it. Talking to others is another great way. Talking to your family. What am I known for? How would you describe me? Trying to pick out some of those things will really help you in understanding who you are and how you want to show up in the workplace so that you can really get that across in your interviews or in your assessment centers. Okay, so I know I've talked for quite some time now, so I'm going to do a quick recap for you. Let's chat about being prepared. Okay, so being prepared, thinking about those practical tips. I know some of them sound silly, but honestly, just being prepared is going to help you have that confidence and push down some of those nerves. So, being your best self and preparing questions for them as well as preparing answers for yourself. And I don't mean scripts, I just mean doing it often so that it feels more natural to you is going to help. Being present, thinking about power poses and that mindful minute, taking a pause and considering your answer before you just blurt something out. This is not a race. You will have the same amount of questions as the others when you're going through an interview. So take your time. And then being your best self. So being authentic to you, really knowing yourself and playing to your strengths. So I will have some time now to go through some of the questions that have been posed, but also I will be sending that takeaway document so you will be able to see that as well. So now a bit of time for the Q&A. So if you haven't, this is where you should get your questions in. And I can see there are already quite a few. So I will do my best at answering some of these. Jack, as well, if you think there are any in particular that you either want to answer or you want me to answer, please let me know. So one of these here, how would you recommend practicing cognitive tests and how many weeks or hours would you recommend for practice before sitting a test for an application? That is a really interesting question. And I really don't think there are a certain amount of weeks or hours. I think with cognitive tests, these can be really tricky because they can be really nerve wracking. But I think the biggest piece, whether it be behavioral or cognitive, is going to be about practicing the platforms that you're given. So like I said, a lot of the time organizations will give you practice links. So it's a great opportunity to do that, and to practice those. So things like numerical reasoning, if you can you read through different data points and try and understand how you might need to answer some of those questions. If it's verbal reasoning, the same kind of thing. It will be looking at different information, and trying to piece together some answers from there and pulling out the answers. And same with kind of critical reasoning. So there are lots on the internet that are free. Don't worry about having to pay for them. But just kind of getting yourself familiar and kind of practicing on those platforms will really, really help. Another one here, how can I overcome imposter syndrome? You know what? I don't think anyone does. But what we just chatted around, being your best self and being present, that's how you can start to combat some of those nerves. It is silly, but there is a reality where everyone is always stepping into something that they don't necessarily know, and they will feel like a bit of an imposter. And it's really, really hard to get past that. But the more that you take the time to reflect on yourself and think about your strengths that you're bringing to the table, the more you realize that actually you're offering a different perspective. And I think that's the big piece here is we all have a part to play. And every single person coming to a role is going to offer a slightly different perspective to either the person that's in that role or the person who's hiring for that role. So it's just about thinking about what you add, what you bring to the table, and then putting that across. And slowly but surely, some of that imposter syndrome will go away. Um, okay, so one of these have been voted by 4 people, so I'll try and answer this one. It's good. It's a long one. What about during digital interviews when you're given a strict amount of time to answer questions? Sometimes I find that there's not enough time to use STAR techniques or properly talk about my experience within the given time frame. How do you approach that? Okay, so that's a really interesting one. So, by digital interviews, I assume this means asynchronous interviews where you need to answer on a video. So, you'll maybe have a minute to prepare and 2 minutes to answer. I think this is going to be about practice. If you know that digital or asynchronous interviews are going to be part of the assessment process, it's really, really important that you take the time to practice so that you can be succinct in your answer. I appreciate that there are going to be lots of details that you want to share about your experience because experiences are often a lot more complex than 2 minutes, but it's about identifying the key points. So, for example, I'm going to flick back. So, hide your eyes if that's a little bit concerning. But if we think back to this question, can you give an example of a situation of where you worked as a team? I need to be careful not to give you so much situation and task information that I can't actually explain the actions that I took or the result. So I need to break that up accordingly. So if you remember my example where it was a situation in that we were asked to get into groups of 4 and we were assigned a topic we were going to have to present in 2 weeks. That didn't take very long, but that was the situation. And then similar with the conflict, we will be talking about that task, giving you the key points of the conflict, and then moving on to the solution and the results. So, whilst there might be a lot, what you need to practice there is being succinct. And the only way that you can do that really well is by taking the time to practice in advance. Okay. In a case where I'm asked to talk about my previous, oh, it's gone. Sorry. Oh, In a case where I'm asked to talk about my previous experience, is it right to talk about what went wrong with my other job, like what made me want to quit? Um, this is a hard one because I think sometimes it's so easy to focus on some of the negative, but I think we need to remember that there are always multiple perspectives. So there might be things that were happening in that job that you weren't aware of, which is why there were certain demands. There are obviously going to be some really horrible things that might be the reason why you quit, or there might be just some things around the fit and it didn't quite work out. I think it's completely reasonable for you to talk about your previous experience and why you're looking for something new. But I think the more that you can put a bit of a positive light on it, the better, just because it's showing your reach for continuous improvement and growth. So, for example, you might want to say, and I'm just making this up on the spot, but you might want to say, in a previous role, I had to I was asked to complete a lot of data input. I really enjoyed that as I got to see a variety of the inputs from the organization, but I was really keen to have some more face to face time and be involved in collaborative work. And so that's what I'm really looking for. How in this role would you expect me to collaborate? So you're kind of showing them what you're wanting from a job, and you're not just harping on some of the negatives that might have happened in the past. Um, will it be okay to ask what organizations plan for the future? Absolutely. And it's really, really interesting. I think you can make that even more specific because you should be doing some of the research on your own. So for that situation, you're going to want to have explored their website. What are their aims? What are their objectives? What's their 5-year plan? And what are they talking about being most important? And then consider your role and how you would impact that. So instead of just saying, what is the organization's plan for the future? You might say, I appreciate in this role, the job description suggests I'm doing X, Y, Z. How does this role impact the 5-year plan of XYZ? So it's linking those things together to really demonstrate your interest in the organization and the fact that you've done a bit of your research, which is really, really important. Okay, I'm going to answer one more just based on the time here. Um, in situations where you are asked a direct question and then you don't have any clue, what should be your best reaction to it? I think it's fair to say that we can all get thrown off. If we think about what I was saying before around taking some time to pause and consider, it's absolutely the time to do that. So if something throws you off, that's okay. Take your pause, think about your mindful minute and centering yourself again. Maybe ask them to repeat the question or repeat the question back to them. Take a sip of water, and then you can have a think about that. If it's really difficult, you can say, you know what? I haven't had a chance to think about that in the past. That's a really great question. Do you mind if I come back to you? And you can either circle back on that question at the end, or you can follow up. But ideally, you'll have something to say. It's hard to kind of answer that without a specific question. But one to think about is just taking a moment to pause, because I think all of the answers are in there. It's just hard to come up with right away. So it's okay to admit that you don't have an answer right away, and it's something that you'd really like to consider. But just being open and honest about that will show that kind of respect. Okay, it is 4:56. I will answer one more just because I've just seen it, and then I will stop. For assessment centers, how do you shine but not be seen as arrogant in a group setting? That's really interesting. Um, I think the biggest piece goes back to being yourself and being your best self. So how you show up authentically. I think recognize as well in a group exercise, you do need to speak up because you are working with other people, so the expectation will be that you're collaborating, and if you don't speak up and people can't see you doing that, then they won't be able to assess you on that. So you need to kind of manage how you come across. So you want to make sure that you are inputting, but also making sure that you're giving other people opportunity to speak as well. What I see work really well is if an individual gives an opinion, it's making sure that you're pulling someone else into the room. So, for example, if I gave an opinion on how we would solve something, I might then say, Jack, what did you see in the information that we looked at before we got going? Was there anything that I was missing? Or what was your take on that? So you're inviting other people into the conversation as well. Okay, there were lots and lots of questions. I'm hoping that our top tips will answer this. I think this hour has absolutely flown by. What about you, Jack?
Yeah, I think certainly answered a lot of questions that I would have had. I think you've definitely explained a lot, Emily Louise. I really appreciate you coming and giving this talk. As I said at the beginning, we will be hopefully showing a recording of this. It won't be straight away, but it will probably be maybe next week. But if you do have any more questions, please feel free. You will get that document that Emily Louise has mentioned. You can also always email general@10,000blackinterns.com with any questions as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for being involved today.
Amazing. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good evening.